Hey guys, it's Michael Niens here. Just kidding, it's Nickens. And before we start the video, make sure you please hit the like and subscribe button. Did you know that 80% of people who watch my videos are not subscribed? So if you like my content, please like and share and also subscribe. So I am super excited to bring this analysis video for you. Today I am bringing an MLW Pitcher Arsenal video. And I'm only going to be doing the top 2 pitchers from every team, and I'm going to be sharing their arsenal. So unfortunately, guys like Aguilar, Zerlag, and Swanson are going to be left out of this list. But anyway, if you would like to see more of these types of analysis videos and would like me to make more, or you have any suggestions for future videos, make sure that you leave it down in the comments. This video was pretty difficult to make. Highlight style content of MLW doesn't allow me to see all the pitches that these guys throw consistently. Another thing is that I don't get to see exactly how they're holding the ball. A big thing about wiffle ball is that the way you grip the ball is really pivotal to the way the ball moves. And so unless I can clearly see it zoomed in, I'm not exactly always going to be sure the kind of pitch they're throwing. I can tell by the motion pretty much, but sometimes I'm going to be a little confused about what the heck they're actually throwing. And lastly, something that's kind of beautiful is that you can throw the same pitch like 30 different ways, really. If you have the technique and the grip down for one pitch, you can throw it with more curve, with less curve. You can throw it with more velocity and less of velocity. You can make it high, low. I mean, there's so many beautiful things that you can do with the way you grip or throw a pitch, which is great, but sometimes trying to put a term or a category on a certain pitch can be super difficult to try and do. So here's a disclaimer. I'm not saying that I have all the pitches that these guys pitched for the 2020 season, but these are all that I could see and put a term on. But if I missed a fun one, I'm sorry, and I'll try to do better. Just let me know if I miss it down in the comments. Another thing is that if you see a pitch maybe from the 2019 season, it could have been dropped in the 2020 season, or they could be still throwing it and I missed it because they didn't show every single pitch. So just keep that in mind. I know some pitchers actually did drop some pitches going into the 2020 season, and some added some, and you'll see that in the video. So let's get into what I'm looking for when I'm defining a pitch. That way you have a little bit of an idea of what my thought process is. So first I'm going to be looking at arm slots. Every pitcher uses different arm slots for pitches, and the arm slots is really critical into understanding what exactly the kind of pitch they're throwing at. The next thing is speed. The next thing up is speed. And we do expect pitchers to be throwing really fast in MLW. It's kind of a must that you're throwing really fast. But at the same time, there also is a speed limit. The amount of speed that you put on a pitch actually affects the way it's thrown sometimes. So you can turn a pitch into an off-speed pitch, but you can also let the pitch, have less speed, and then it turns into an entirely different pitch itself. And the next thing that I'm looking for is horizontal or lateral movement. This is kind of looking at the left to right or right to left motion of a ball. That's going to tell me which way it's breaking, and it's going to tell me pretty much, the kind of pitch that it is. But also, the vertical movement of the ball is also going to show me kind of whether it rises and drops is really important to defining the pitch. I mean, we all know what a drop ball and a riser is, but depending on that lateral motion along with the vertical motion is going to tell you exactly what the pitch is. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and jump into the video with the Coastal Cobras. So first up for the Cobras, we got Sean Flynn. Sean Flynn's arsenal is all based on the spectrum of the slider with the occasional drop ball mixed in. I think Sean is intentionally affecting the amount of break and speed on his pitches, so I'd say his arsenal includes a slider, a hard slider, two-seam, more of an off-speed slider really, and a fastball too. I will also say that it's pretty much assumed that most pitchers can throw a fastball. I would be very surprised if there was a pitcher in the league that couldn't throw the ball straight. I think Sean's pitches do have a good break on them, but they're not fast enough to really be worked in often. Sometimes there's almost a rising slider and a drop ball, but they're usually not even close to hitting the zone. So I'm not sure if it's an actual pitch or if it's just a slider that got away from him. So let's go ahead and break each pitch down for Flynn. So let's start off with slider. Sean Flynn's slider is a really nice pitch. Flynn's slider is usually used to swing out wide and then come back towards the plate. I would say this is probably the number one pitch that I saw from Flynn. Sometimes he'll make his slider rise, but again, I'm not exactly sure if that's just him losing control of the pitch. But for the most part, what he's using with his slider is that he's swinging it out and making it come back into the zone. But I have seen him use it and try and go back to the right side of the zone. That leads into his hard slider, which his hard slider is kind of the same as his slider, but it comes out a little more straight and then curves off faster. He tries to paint both sides of the zone, but he's usually using his slider for the left side and then his hard slider for the right side. So next pitch is his two-seam. It's almost a mix between his hard slider and kind of like a cut fastball almost, because it does have some left to right motion, but it's not as much as a slider in any way. Plus, it's a faster pitch than his slider. His slider is actually kind of slow getting to the zone, whereas the two-seam is getting to the zone pretty quickly. Most of the time, it will be in the lower part of the zone, as if he's aiming for the bottom part of the pipe. I've seen him pitch it higher in the zone, but every time it's been higher in the zone, the batter gets a hit out of it. So in order for him to throw harder, he has to throw lower in the zone. There's also his fastball, which he used to strike out Ryan Kelly in the Wildcats game. Nothing too much to note from the fastball other than it's a great pitch that he used to pipe up the side. So you can see he's got some accuracy with throwing. So the last pitch that he has, it looks nothing like his sliders, and it's his drop ball that he used against Gavin Nareski in the first start of the season. It was a pretty nasty pitch, and I was wondering why I didn't really see it much the rest of the games. It could be that he uses it earlier in the count, but I think it's a good pitch that he should use to try and strike more batters out. With that in mind, I think we can see why Sean kind of struggled this year. All of his pitches have similar arm motions, so the batters really just had to wait for one of his sliders to be in the zone and then blast it out of the park. The fastball and the drop ball were not utilized as much in comparison to his cutter and slider, which meant that Sean's pitching was a little one-dimensional. Even with a stellar pitcher coming this next season, I think Flynn has to develop some more pitches, because there's always the potential that this draft pick won't show up or something happens to Drew and he's sick. I think being a lefty is a really good thing. And before this, I think he was the only lefty pitcher until Jonah Heath came into the league. And Jonah Heath had a lot of success this season. So I think if Sean develops a curveball or a screwball, it could really help him with his ERA. It'll put some different motion on the ball and it'll help keep the batters guessing. And maybe a secondary goal for Sean is to add a drop ball or a pitch that has a lot more break on it, but still a pretty good arsenal. So next up we got Drew Davis. So Drew Davis is a pitcher known for his sidearm style of pitching. However, in times of desperation, he can switch back into a more overhand style of pitching, and we saw that in the Wildcats game. Drew's pitches are based on pitches that have a lot of break on them, while mixing in pitches that can really deceive the batter with their lack of motion. I think we all know Drew for his signature slider drop, but out of his sidearm arsenal, we also know that he has a riser, a slider, a fastball, a rising screwball, a two-seam riser, and even a changeup. When the batter starts seeing him, though, later in the game, he can switch into some overhand style pitches. He utilizes a screwball, a slider, a 12-6 drop ball, and a slider drop, along with a fastball. I will also say that Drew Davis also mixes in some off-speed options with his pitches. They're not necessarily any different, but they're just a little bit of speed taken off to mix things up. So let's get a breakdown for really every pitch. If you don't already know about his slider drop from the tutorial vid they did about 2 years back, one of the pitches they featured was his slider drop. And I mean, this is just a dirty pitch. It's not only got a ton of velocity on it, but it's also got a lot of break, and he uses to hit the lower parts of the pipes pretty consistently. However, sometimes it does get away from him, but most of the time it is a really accurate pitch in his arsenal. The next pitch we should look at is his fastball, as well as his riser. I'm going to use the fastball and riser kind of as a combo pitch because they essentially are doing the same thing. It's just the riser is obviously rising. So I'm going to put those in kind of the same lane. Most of the pitches that he is using to paint the upper parts of the zone are his fastball and riser, and he's pretty consistent with these two. The fastball is used to paint really the right and left corner, whereas the riser kind of hits maybe lower to the middle part of the zone. These pitches are really effective when they're not predicted or they're really accurate. However, in the case of his slider drop, if he does not have the pace or accuracy required for the pitch, they can easily be taken advantage of. Sometimes they miss really wildly, but that's okay. But the barely missed and slow pitches are usually the ones that are getting taken yard. More of a secondary pitch, he has a sidearm slider. It adds a really well-needed mix-up to his lineup of pitches. Next, we have the rising screwball and rising two-seam. So the screwball is going to have a lot more break on it in comparison to the two-seamer, which has a more consistent kind of motion to it. The screwball has a ton of movement and it'll curve off to the side. However, the two-seamer is interesting due to the fact that it starts in a similar fashion to the screwball, but it doesn't break as hard. And I love that and how they work together. The final one in his sidearm arsenal is an absolutely ridiculous changeup that he does. The only time I was able to find it is that he struck out James Swanson in the Preds games. And all I want to know is how in the world did this work? I feel like it's like a forbidden pitch or like an ephus pitch almost. Or either that or it's one of the most legendary pitches I've ever seen. And only the greats of wiffle ball could really harness the power of the changeup. So let's move on to his overhand arsenal, which Drew has some more solid pitches in. But again, these are not his go-to kind of pitches. So first we have a screwball, which I don't have him actually hitting the zone with. So I'm feeling like this pitch is more of a mix-up that has a ton of motion in order to bait the batter into really swinging. He's got a pretty sweet slider as well, which I feel is his most solid pitch in the overhand arsenal. And that's mostly because he got a few strikeouts with it. And of course he has a fastball, but again, he doesn't really want to be throwing it unless he's supremely confident in it. He's also got a couple of drop balls, one of which is more like his slider drop, and the other one is a 12-6 curve drop. The slider can get away from Drew, but the curveball consistently drops. I'm not exactly sure if he's doing like a splitter grip or anything, so I'm just going to call it a 12-6 curveball drop. So either way, these are some good pitches with some nice movement. And under the right circumstances, they're really good mix-ups. But again, if he's not throwing them with complete confidence and speed, these are going to get knocked out of the park. For the most part, Drew's pitches have really good synergy together. I think my only wish for Drew is that he may be able to find a pitch that works differently from his other stuff in his arsenal that is consistently making people miss. And that's really hard to find, but maybe developing a pitch kind of like that would be nice. Maybe his success with a changeup will drive him to utilize a knuckleball, which would be absolutely sick to see somebody throw a knuckle. Probably not a great pitch to throw, but still, it's just a wish list. But anyway, really a great arsenal of nice pitches that really support each other. So next up we got the downtown Diamondbacks and we have Jonah Heath. So I may be missing a few pitches from Heath's arsenal, especially since I only got to see 3 games from him, and I may be misdefining some as well. So for Jonah, we have his slider, which is probably the pitch I saw the most from him. But he also has a slurve, which could be a knuckle drop, but I'm pretty sure it's a slurve because when I look into the grip on it, he doesn't knuckle up like Daniel Schultz does. He's also got a screwball drop and a 12-6 drop ball, and all from the overhand position. And occasionally, he usually goes down into the sidearm position to do a fastball riser combo. The pitch I saw Jonah throw the most consistently was his slider. This pitch is really nice. It has a ton of break on it, and it's super satisfying to watch. However, I did see that really good batters were able to locate this pitch pretty well. And I'm not sure if it's because he uses the pitch a lot, or it's because that pitchers throw the slider so often that they're used to it. What I would say his signature pitch is his slurve. I mean, this pitch is absolutely filthy. It's just a huge curve, and then it just drops off at the plate. And he's been able to hit the zone pretty consistently with it, so I would say this is a pitch you have to watch out for. He also mixes in a couple of other drops. He has a screwball drop, and then also more of a 12-6 drop. He doesn't use these pitches often, but they are really good mix-ups. And if he mixes them in properly, these pitches can freeze the batter. So the last 2 pitches are both out of his sidearm slot, and these were the riser and the fastball. Now this could just be a riser or just be a fastball, but I figured I say them both just in case. These pitches basically serve the same purpose, and that's to hit the pipes. And it's always a good pitch, but you can't throw it too much, especially if you get gassed and you don't have as much motion or speed on them. So Jonah Heath doesn't have a huge arsenal of pitches that I saw, but all of these pitches are good and they work well because they all have a similar arm slot coming out of his hand. And I hope this year has given him some good reps for next year, and that way he can bring down his ERA in the MLW. But still, he has a really great arsenal. All right, next up we got Jimmy Norp. Jimmy's arsenal may not look insane on paper, but when you see them in motion, they just look so good. From his overhand slots, he has a slider and a couple of drops, which is a screwball and a 12-6 curve. He can also shift into his sidearm and do more of a fastball and a riser, but he can also make more of off-speed pitches with the fastball and riser too. And he also has a slider drop that looks really good when he's able to pull it off. So first we're going to check out his slider, and it's just a nasty pitch. It almost feels like it's floating in air. It's like a cartoon kind of slider. If you told me like Tom and Jerry were going to throw a slider, this is what I would say the slider would look like. However, the thing about his slider is that people can really locate his pitch. It's not because he's throwing a bad slider. It's because people are so easily ready to locate a slider. So they're probably waiting to hit that. So next up we have his 2 drop balls, which one is more of a screwball drop. And this is just so hard to locate. This thing comes out looking like it's going to go to his left and just cuts back to the right. He can also put it more of a 12-6 drop on it where he has it going to the left and it just keeps staying left. So these pitches work really well together in order to keep people guessing. And the thing about it is that he can trust it because he's able to hit the pipes really consistently with it. Moving on to his sidearm slots, the pitches that he used early on in the season were his fastball and his riser. But I'm going to put them together. These pitches are really fast. He's able to get a lot of velocity on them. And again, he's just trying to paint corners with them. And if you're really not expecting them, he can pipe you up. And the last pitch I was able to see is his slider drop, which again, he has a ton of speed on it. It doesn't slide as much, and that's probably to the pitch having so much pace. It's just able to come out of his hand and drop right into the plate. I mean, every pitch in Jimmy's arsenal is tough to hit. It's really about picking your poison. He's got a lot of speed and motion on his pitches, and that makes his arsenal really dangerous. However, if you are able to predict it, you can get hits off of him. So next up, we're moving on to the Eastern Eagles, which means we got Clayton Price. I actually went back and checked through 2019 to make sure I wasn't missing anything, but I don't think I am. So Clayton, out of his overhand slots, are going to be throwing pitches with a lot of motion. So he has a slider, a 12-6 drop ball, and also a slider drop, which could be more of a hard slider depending on the way you define it. And then for his sidearm slot, he throws fast pitches that are faster and don't have as much break on them. He throws a riser and a fastball, but he also has some times that he can throw in a changeup as well. The pitch that I saw the most from him was his slider. His slider doesn't swing out as much as, say, Jimmy Norp's, but it still has a good amount of motion on it, and it kind of starts out straight and then breaks towards the pipes. He also has a couple of drop balls. One of them is a 12-6 drop, but he didn't use this pitch much in 2020. And he also has what appears to be a slider drop, but again, this could be that he's throwing his slider harder and just making it more of a downward angle, kind of towards the bottom left of the pipes. On his sidearm, he's basically throwing fastballs and risers. He's throwing these risers and fastballs super quick. Clayton is really trying to hit the pipes. He can also utilize putting less speed on it and making it more of a changeup. Once batters are suspecting more of a fast pitch, he can take some off of it and get them to swing. So Clayton really doesn't have a ton of pitches, but it's the way that he utilizes them that makes him so successful. He's really smart in the way that he mixes up his batters and his pitches that are really good for him to control. I only saw a few times on film where he didn't have complete control over the pitch. So even though it's not a huge arsenal, he uses it really effectively. So next up we got Dan Schultz's arsenal. Dan has some really dirty pitches in his arsenal. And of course we all know him for his knuckle drops, one of which is more like a curveball motion from 12-6, while the other one has more of 11-5 slurve motion. He rarely throws anything else out of his overhand, but when he does, he also has a slider and a 12-6 drop ball that isn't knuckled. From his sidearm, this is where you get more of his bread and butter pitches. He has a fastball and riser, which are used to be really quick and hit pipes. Occasionally, he'll mix in some off-speed pitches, as well as a two-seam riser, a screwball riser, and a changeup drop. So let's start with Dan's knuckle drop. These take two forms, like I said earlier. One of which he kind of throws way over his head and allows it to come back down. It's going to be completely vertical for the most part. You can tell when he's about to throw it, but the thing about it is that this pitch is just so difficult to hit. And to add to that, he can also mix an 11-5 motion, which is more of a slurve line. So not only are you dealing with this knuckle drop that you know is coming, but he's able to mix up the way he throws it, and that just gives you so much trouble trying to predict where it's going to go. And not only that, but these are super quick. They have a ton of velocity on them. Dan just makes it so hard to predict, and very rarely he'll mix in a slider. He doesn't throw it often, and I can see why, especially with batters who are accustomed to hitting slider. But when he does use it, it's a great pitch. And he also did throw a non-knuckle drop ball once against Alec Warda, and he hit a home run off of it. So I'm assuming that he was just drained from throwing the knuckle for 6 innings, and he's trying to get out of the inning. But I thought I would mention it since he did throw it once. So moving on to his sidearm slots, you're going to be looking for his favorite pitches, which are fastballs and right. You're going to be seeing a ton of clips of Dan just placing these in crazy spots, barely nicking the pipe. It's a super dangerous pitch because he's able to control the speed on it. So he can make it super fast, or he can also make it more of an off-speed pitch. But not only this, but he can also change the riser and add some more variation to it. He's thrown some two-seam risers and as well as some screwball risers. The last pitch is something that I really don't know how to define other than a changeup drop. He's got a C grip on it, much how you would throw a slider. However, the pitch does not have a lot of lateral movement. It has a very clean rise and then will quickly fall into the zone. And it's a great mix-up pitch when he throws it in. Dan Schultz has a really great arsenal. And one of the things that makes him so dangerous is his ability to be so accurate, while he's also throwing pitches that have a ton of speed and big movement on. I think this is what makes Dan such an elite pitcher in the league. And he may have struggled in 2020, but you know he will be dealing in 2021. So next up we have the Great Lakes Gators, and both of these guys are really good enough to be starting pitchers. So I'm just going to start with Brendan because his name starts with B. So Brendan Jorgensen's arsenal is really one about speed. A lot of his pitches are hard to judge because they start off so quick and then will break late into the zone. However, when they do break, they break really quickly. A majority of Jorgensen's pitches come from overhand arm slots. He has a screwball, a riser, a fastball, a slider, a 12-6 drop ball, a screwball drop, and a slider drop. The only pitch that I was able to see from his arsenal that was in a sidearm slot was his screwball riser. But I would not be surprised if he had more though. All of Jorgensen's pitches are really interesting to watch, especially his slider. His slider is dependent on how hard he follows through. So if he follows through close and harder, it's going to be going more to the left. Whereas he follows through more straight, it's not going to break as much. Something else you might notice is that the way he throws many of his pitches have a downward trajectory due to how hard he's throwing. This is also true for his riser and his fastball. You'll notice that his riser starts to go down at first, and then it'll quickly rise back up. This makes his riser a little more difficult to hit because it works so well with his fastball. The ability to switch between these two is a big help in his arsenal. Jorgensen is also able to work in a few drop balls as well. The first is more of a 12-6 curveball. This pitch works in tandem with his screwball drop. Depending on how much spin he puts on the ball, it'll show how much it'll break back to the right. So sometimes the pitch is going to be straight drop over to the left. However, he can mix more spin on it and put it back towards the right side of the pipes. Not only that, but later into the season, he also worked in more of a slider drop, where he would bring the slider down lower and bring more of the drop motion into it, which is a great combination to have all of these together for his drop balls. And lastly, sometimes he'll go into his sidearm slot, but the only pitch I've only been able to see from him was his screwball riser, so maybe he can work some more sidearm pitches into his arsenal. For the most part, Jorgensen has a great arsenal of pitches that are all thrown with a lot of velocity. They have a really tight break on them, which makes them harder to turn on super quickly unless you are expecting the pitch. So it's no wonder that a lot of batters had trouble against Jorgensen this season. Now we're going to move on to Chris Cheatham, the playoffs MVP. Chris Cheatham's arsenal is super interesting because I feel like he uses his slider in a lot of interesting and distinct ways as a pitcher. He has a slider, a hard slider, and a slider drop. And he also has some dangerous drops he mixes in as well. There's a 12-6 curveball and a screwball drop. And to top it off, he's also got the fastball riser combo with a changeup, and it all in the overhand wheelhouse. I found it really interesting to break down Cheatham's slider because it has so many different uses. His hard slider is much like Jorgensen's slider, where it starts out high and crosses low at a super high speed. But he can also make it swing out wider and give it less velocity, kind of like Norp's slider. His dips a lot more, and it can bend around people as he throws it. His best pitch is against Jonah Heath, where he literally goes around Heath and hits the bottom part of the corner. Another part is that he actually has another slider drop. He actually has a slider drop. So where the slider is actually kind of slower, the slider drop has a ton of pace to it and then drops way off of the plate in comparison to his slider. So speaking of drop balls, he also has two more. One is more of a screwball drop that looks like it's going to the left but breaks back to the right, while the other one is more of your consistent 12-6 drop that doesn't have a ton of lateral movement to it. And he also has a fastball slash riser, and I'm not sure if it's one or the other, And he also can mix up a changeup into the mix as well. And it's not just an off-speed version of the pitch. However, I will point out that he does that sometimes. I think Cheatham gives a great mix-up to what Jorgensen already has, and that's what made him so effective in the Gators lineup. He was able to come in and switch up the way he was using his pitches in complement to Jorgensen, and it made him really dangerous because you would be expecting kind of a similar pitch from Jorgensen, and then the next Cheatham would come in and he just absolutely decimate you in a different way. I'm really excited to see what the Gators can do next season in free agency and stuff like that, and that way maybe they're able to add some more bats into their lineup. So next up we got the Metro Magic and Liam Jackson. Liam Jackson was a happy surprise for the Magic this season, and he helped the Magic get 2 crucial wins this season. Unfortunately, I don't have a ton of film on Liam, so I'm not going to be confident with his full arsenal, but I am excited to show you what I did see. Jackson pitches more from a sidearm slot, and he has a screwball drop, a 12-6 drop, a fastball, a riser, and a changeup, as well as a slider. His drops are comparable to some we've already seen in the league. His screwball pitch, he's putting a ton of torque and spin on it for it to change direction, so it's going to start out to his left but quickly break back to the right. While his other 12-6 curve is going to have a lot more up and down motion to it. It doesn't have a ton of speed on it, but it's a nice mix-up from his screwball that does have a ton of speed on it. He's also got a riser and a fastball combo going on. However, I haven't seen him pipe corners consistently with all these pitches yet, and that's because he probably doesn't have a full year yet getting used to the strike zone. So I feel like he can bring those pitches into his arsenal more next year. The last pitches he's using is a slider and a changeup. The changeup is a pretty slow pitch and similar in motion to the curve, however, it doesn't break nearly as much, and it stays more in the zone. His slider is something he doesn't use often, but it is a nice pitch. It doesn't have a ton of break on it, but it is not fast like a hard slider. I think Liam still has some improvements to make in his arsenal, and I would like for him to have more accuracy and be more comfortable with his pitches next season. That way he can have some more velocity on it. I think if he adds another pitch and puts more speed into his pitches, he can develop into a nice pitcher in the MLW. So next up we got Jason Chadwick. Jason Chadwick was the ace all year for the Magic. He led the Magic to a second straight playoff berth, as well as their first playoff win. Chadwick is a sidearm pitcher, and in his arsenal, he utilizes a fastball, a riser, a slider, a screwball drop, a hard slider, a 12-6 drop, and a 2-seam. Chadwick has some serious speed with his fastball riser combo. It not only is a super quick pitch to the plate, but it also rises super quickly. Not only that, but he can mix up between the two, trying to get batters to guess between them. However, I did see sometimes that it could get away from him, but for the most part, he's really able to hit the zone with the pitch. The next pitch is his sliders. For one, he has a normal slider which has less speed and a good amount of turn on it. And he's also got a hard slider which turns quicker and is a faster pitch. For the most part, the hard slider is going to the left side of the zone, while his slider is going to the right side of the zone. And he's also got a 2-seam, which is a really fast pitch with only a little bit of turn. These sliders are kind of a trifecta of right to left swinging pitches for Chadwick. The last pitches I want to focus on are his drop balls, which are a screwball drop and a 12-6 drop. The screwball drop is a lot like Liam's, however Chadwick just drops off more of the table than Liam's. While he rarely uses the 12-6 drop, when he does, it's a good mix-up pitch to throw in to keep batters guessing. The more I looked into Chadwick's film, the more I liked his pitching. I think the numbers can be a little inflated at times due to the fact that he was pitching multiple games with extras. So I think the Magic can improve their run support next year. Chadwick will become a better pitcher in the MLW. So next up we got the Midwest Mallards and Trevor Bonham. Bonham didn't have the best start in the MLW, and after he settled his nerves, he became a great force on the mound for the Mallards. From what I saw in his arsenal, he has a screwball drop, a 12-6 drop, a 2-seam, a slider, and a changeup. And from his sidearm slot, he likes to use a riser and a fastball. And don't be fooled by these earlier games. And later on the season, he was getting a speed warning he was throwing so fast. When we look into his screwball drop, it has more of a sinker style into it than other guys who throw this pitch. It will start off to his left and then will straighten out to the right and drop. He really improved this pitch as the season went on and had great success hitting the pipes. The other drop ball he used is the 12-6 curve drop. He doesn't use it as much as a screwball drop, but it's a nice mix-up when the screwball drop isn't working. He also has a 2-seam and a changeup. His overhand pitch fastball is more like a cut fastball since it drifts off to his left. It's not as fast as his sidearm, but it's still a good pitch. He also has a changeup, which is pretty similar to his 12-6 drop ball. However, it's not going to have as much drop to it. It's going to stay in the zone more, which I think is a pretty good synergy between the two pitches. The last pitch he has is a slider, and this thing is pretty filthy. I'm sure he uses it more earlier part of the count because I didn't really see him use it all that often until the end of the season. It doesn't swing out as wide as Norp's. It's similar to Jorgensen's, but he doesn't have it angled down. This is one of the pitches that he got a speed warning about, and it is great. So definitely watch out for this one. He only has a couple of sidearm pitches, but both are really consistent. His riser is a great pitch, but oftentimes it can get away from him and rise a lot. But when he does control it, he can really hit the pipes. He also has a fastball that can really catch people off guard. It has a lot more speed than control, but it can really set up his other pitches in his arsenal. I really like Bottom's arsenal, and I think it's great that he can mix up so many pitches. However, you'll see in the clips when he does lose control and hangs one, the batters will take him long. So I think if Trevor Bottom is able to find pitches that he's able to not hang up in the zone, he'll really make batters have to earn their home runs next season. So next up we got Tommy Coughlin. Tommy's arsenal is pretty iconic. His pitches have always been tough to hit because he always has a ton of velocity and motion on his pitches. He pretty much throws overhand, but he will constantly change his arm slots. He has a slider, a gypsy drop, a screwball drop, which is the same grip as his gypsy drop. He has a hard slider, a changeup, and a 12-6 curve, which has a different motion to it than the gypsy drop. So first up we have his slider and his hard slider. I'm going to be showing them as two different pitches because one he really swings out more, and this slider he'll use to paint both sides of the zone with. And it's got a whole lot more movement, and it makes for a great pitch. However, Tommy can switch it up and use more of a hard slider. It's got a lot less lateral movement, but it's faster and more succinct in its motion, which means that he has a great switch up from his slider when it's not working. Now for his signature pitch that we've all been waiting for, the gypsy drop, which comes in two forms. One is more of a screwball drop that swings back to his right, and the other I had some hard time defining, but I think I finally nailed it down. I think it's basically a vertical slider. Because it's not a slurve or a curveball, it's something in between. But I think if you take his slider and put it vertically, it would match the gypsy drop. The gypsy drop is basically if you had a cartoonist and asked them to make a perfect curveball. This would be Tommy Coughlin's pitch. Both of these are really hard to hit, and that's what makes him such an iconic pitcher. Next are his changeup and his curveball, which do not happen very often, but when he does use it, it's mostly for a mix-up from his main pitches. They're mostly simple pitches just for a mix-up, so I also assume that he also has a fastball and a riser, but I didn't really get to see them. What makes Tommy so dangerous as a pitcher is that his arm releases and grips have similar motions to them, which means if you try to predict a pitch based off his windup, you will be mostly unsuccessful. Since everything looks so similar, you really won't know what Tommy is throwing until you see the ball's flight, so this is what makes his arsenal so good. Alec Warda was a great backup to Cratch this season, and was able to help out with the Preds in a position to win in 2020. I didn't get a ton of film on him, but what I did see was a slider, a riser, a fastball, a slider drop, and a drop ball. The pitches he uses the most is his slider. He usually is using it up in the zone, but he can put his arm slot down and put it lower. It's usually going towards the left side of the zone, and he's trying to hit the pipes there. Another pitch he likes to mix in is his riser and fastball. It's a pitch that he can either use to make the batter swing or want to paint the pipes. Warda has some great experience in pitching, and he's really able to put some speed on the pitches. He also has a couple of drop ball he uses, however, I only got to see one of them due to the lack of... I saw the slider drop, which looks like an absolutely nasty pitch. He also has a 12-6 drop ball, but I'm really not exactly sure what it is, since I only saw him throw it twice, and it was either hit or hit the ground before it could get near the plate. Overall, Alec Warda is a veteran, and he still has a really good arsenal. Of course, he could have more pitches, and hopefully I'll get to see them next year if they don't draft a new pitcher. I would love for him to develop some new pitches, though, and see what he could do in the 2021 season. Alright, now we're on to Ryan Cratch. And Ryan Cratch was the 2020 Cy Young for a reason, and I feel that he has the arsenal to bolster and prove that he's an elite pitcher in the league. Cratch utilizes all of his arm slots in order to effectively strike batters out. In the overhand arm slot, he has a slider, a hard slider, a slurve, and a 12-6 curveball. While this on its own is a pretty deadly arsenal, his bread and butter comes through his sidearm and submarine pitches. These include a screwball, a fastball riser combo, along with a changeup, a slider drop, a rising screwball, and a rising two-seam. A pitch that you'll see a lot from Cratched is a slider. The reason why is because he has a ton of control over the pitch. I mean, I can't count how many times he is able to barely nick the corner of the pipes. It's a super dangerous pitch, since most guys throw a slider, but having a really accurate slider is something that is a really good tool to have. He can also mix in a more of a hard slider, which darts way more to the left. A lot of times he is able to adjust the speed and can bait batters into swinging early, so it's a really great mix-up from his slider. The last two pitches I saw from his overhand arm slots were a slurve and a 12-6 curve. You're not going to see these pitches a ton, but they are great mix-ups from his slider. The slurve is going to come out of his hand much like his slider, but fall off way quicker. And the 12-6 curve is something that he can mix in with a ton of height and then fall off, or controller and make it drop faster. So again, some great mix-ups. Moving on to his sidearm and submarine pitches, this is where you get into some supremely difficult pitches. First off, you have his rising screwball and his rising two-seam, which are super hard pitches to read and predict. The rising screwball has a ton of vertical and lateral motion to it, but not only that, it's super difficult to hit because it's so quick. And you're just going to have to be ready for that pitch. While the two-seam has less vertical and horizontal motion, it's going to swing out wide, and Cratch is going to be able to find the left side of the zone with it really consistently. He's also got a fastball riser combo, as well as a changeup to throw in as well. Again, Cratch has an absolute cannon on the fastball and the riser, and not only that, he's deadly accurate with it as well. And if that wasn't enough, he can throw in the changeoff to really throw batters off balance. The last two pitches he has are a screwball drop and a slider drop. His screwball is pretty deadly, and it can buckle your knees if you're ready for a slider or a slurve. And then his slider drop is just another way to mix you up, because you can see his slider coming out, and then it will just drop off the plate so quickly. I mean, he has perfected so many different pitches, and they all have such great synergy together. When Cratch is on fire, you don't want to face him as a batter. If you take a look at the 2019 World Series, he was basically untouchable. His pitches work so well together, and even if you are able to see what's coming, he is so difficult to hit still. It didn't work out for the Preds this year, but they're basically a lock for the playoffs next year. And if they fix the production and offensive issues, these guys will be a strong force in 2021. So finally, we have the Western Wildcats and Nick Saylor. I think something interesting to hear about Nick Saylor is that in tournaments without speed limits, he could throw around 80 miles per hour or something like that. And I wonder how much that has affected his arsenal in the MLW. I didn't get to see a ton of film on him, but what I did see was a slider, a two-seam, a hard slider, and a fastball, and he can also drop down into a sidearm for a riser. It seems that Nick used his slider more early on in the season when he was having trouble adjusting to the strike zone. He uses both a slider and a hard slider to try hit both sides of the zone. His slider was slower and hangs on to the outside and curves in, while his hard slider darts in and goes across the zone more. He also loves to use a fastball and a riser, most likely because he really wants to hit the zone. I think early on in the season, he wasn't hitting the zone consistently, so he began using it more. And often, later into the games in the season, he was able to hit the zone more, and it really worked out well for him. He also has a two-seam, which is more like a fastball, but with a little more left to right motion on it. He can also drop down sometimes in for a riser, but he doesn't use it often enough, and it doesn't have a ton of motion. It's not the most impressive arsenal, and I think I may have missed some picks. But Saylor did lead the Wildcats to 3 wins this season, and I think that's all that really matters. I'm interested to see the draft in 2021 to see if Nick pitches next season, because honestly, all he has to do for Wildcats is rake. So maybe getting a pitcher and taking the pressure off Saylor will be good. But they also have Aguilar, and if he can get off work more next season, he could be the next man up so Saylor doesn't have to pitch. Alright, the one you've all been waiting for, we're going to go into Kyle Schultz's arsenal. Something interesting that I got to hear from Drew Davis firsthand was the fact that Kyle was trying out a new drop this season, similar to Drew's slider drop. And I was looking into it, you can definitely see how Kyle has developed it, but in 2 distinct ways. One is definitely very similar to Drew Davis's slider drop. However, aside from that, he can use it in more of a changeup drop similar to Dan's. He also has a few pitches that can stay flat or rise. He has a fastball riser combo. He has a two-seam riser, a screwball riser, as well as a slider. So let's check out those new drop balls. He really starts down in his motion and just fires it off like a missile. And with the grip he's using, the pitches are just able to hit so hard. One is more like a slider drop, and it starts sliding off and will tail off into the corner of the zone, while the other is more of a change-up drop and has less lateral motion and is aimed more to the right side of the pipes. I mean, for a new pitch in his arsenal, this is supremely accurate, and I think it's crazy for him to just have used this as a new pitch. For his main pitches, let's start into his two-seam and his screwball. Both of these pitches are used as both a riser and regular. The times they are flat, he's going to be swinging out wide with them and staying low. He's mostly aiming for the bottom part of the zone, while the risers just add another layer of difficulty to them. He can really control how much the two-seam and the riser can rise, and I mean, he can make him hit both sides of the corner, and he can throw them so hard they can rise past the zone. So these are some really dangerous pitches that you have to watch out for. And while you're watching out for those pitches, he can mix in pitches with less motion in order for you to be fooled. He has a fastball and a riser along with a slider. So these are more of your mix-up pitches, so when you expect a slider for a drop, he can throw his slider. When you expect for them to rise, he can just throw a fastball. When you're expecting for the screwball or two-seam to go more left or right, he can just throw a riser. I think this is what makes Kyle Schultz such a dangerous pitcher, is that all of his pitches work with such synergy. They have so much mix-up potential. Plus, with his unorthodox pitching style and delivery, it's no wonder why he's able to win so many games. So now to close the videos, I want you guys who are looking to better craft your pitching or to look to add some pitches and stuff like that. I have some statistics on the pitches that were used this year and some essentials that every pitcher should probably have. So for your essentials, you're probably going to need a slider. Sliders are a mainstay in every pitcher's arsenal in the MLW. So either means that the slider is really oversaturated or a slider is a super useful pitch that every pitcher should know. And I think it's the latter. Next, you need to have an off-speed variation of the pitches in your arsenal. Now, it doesn't have to be every pitch, but you got to have enough control over your pitches to affect the speed consistently, because otherwise, you're going to be struggling for mix-ups. Most everyone can throw a riser or fastball, and if you really want to lock down these two pitches, you can make them super accurate and quick as well. So these can be a super great part of your arsenal. And lastly, for your essentials, you're going to need a drop ball. Some guys like to use the 12-6, but really any drop ball will do as a part of your arsenal. Some unique pitches that you could look to model are the Dan Schultz knuckleballs. They may be hard to throw, but they are super useful pitches that a pitcher could look to model. And of course, you also have the gypsy drop, which is a great pitch to have. You can always look to learn from it because they have their tutorial videos on it. So definitely check those out. I'm excited to see the changes and the improvement into 2021. What pitches will pick up and what pitches will drop off. That's going to be it for the video, guys. Make sure you like and subscribe and share the video with your friends. And let me know of anything that I missed. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks so much.